Hi, my name is Daniel Zen. I founded Zen Digital. I'm going to talk today on AngularJS and PhoneGap, how to create iPhone and Android apps using AngularJS. Let's see what we got here. So my background. I have a strong Agile background. In fact, back when Agile was called extreme programming, that's when I got involved with it. So I used to consult for Google and Pivotal back in the day. And I took a short break and I started using, I came back and I started using, I needed a framework. So I started using Angular about 2 years ago, just as it was switching to its 1.0 state. And then I started the AngularJS NYC meetup about 19 months ago. And then last year I reformed Zen Digital. I used to do Zen Digital way back in the 90s during that first internet boom. And I realized when deciding what Zen Digital was doing these days that it couldn't just be web application development anymore. It had to be mobile and web application development. I had a strong Java background, and that would have logically led to doing Android development. But I wanted to leverage my love of AngularJS, and so how could I do that? And also I wanted to be able to create iOS applications. So that led me to PhoneGap, also known as Cordova. So the pros of AngularJS. The first pro is Mishko. Why Mishko? Because I knew Mishko, and actually I was searching for a framework, and I did a search on Backbone, and Google came back to me and said, one of your friends is talking about Backbone, and it was Mishko, comparing Angular to Backbone. And as I delved deeper, I realized that Mishko had created this wonderful framework, and I knew him, I trusted him, and I never turned back. That was pretty much my decision. I used to do a lot of testing in my front ends, and I used to use JSUnit and Selenium, and now we're able to still do testing, agile development with Jasmine and Karma, and I used to use JS Test Driver before Karma. Angular has less code, therefore less bugs, maintainability. It's a lot of this stuff you already know, so I'm going to go over this slide pretty quickly. It's got directives for usability, promises for asynchronous. It's an opinionated framework. It's got momentum right now and allows you to create single-page applications. What are the cons? Well, Angular wants to own the DOM, and sometimes you're dealing with pre-existing code that already wants to own the DOM, and so you've got to wrap it in a directive if you really want it to play well with others. Despite the content and knowledge in this room, there are still not a lot of coders who know it really well, this room excluded, and it's still maturing, but very, very quickly. PhoneGap background. PhoneGap was created in 2009. It enabled access to the native device features, such as geolocation, accelerometers, cameras, push notifications. It's open source, cross-platform. It's device neutral. There's more web developers than Objective-C developers. And in 2011, PhoneGap source got contributed to the Apache Cordova project, and Adobe acquired the PhoneGap name and their developers. So PhoneGap allows you to embed HTML5 code inside of a web view. How many people here have used PhoneGap? Just want to get a show of hands. Okay, so a little less than 50, but pretty good. So that gives me an idea of how to talk to this crowd. So you're able to extend with native plugins that allow you access to native features of the phone. For example, like in-app purchases or access to other apps that are running on the phone, like Facebook. That makes that native stuff accessible via JavaScript. You can build and deploy tools allow you to write about 1.5 times and run everywhere. You don't write once, you write about 1.5 times. You can be used with almost any web framework, and here quickly visualized, you take your JavaScript, your CSS3, your HTML5, and you wrap it in PhoneGap, and you're able to deploy it to the App Store. So PhoneGap in 15 seconds. So all of you, of course, already have Node installed. Great. If you want to be developing for iOS, you're going to have Xcode installed. If you're going to be developing for Android, you're going to have SDK for Android installed. And then you would run these lines here. So let's take a look. We're running these lines here. See, I was a little prepped there. Unfortunately, I wasn't as prepped. I was supposed to run that. I was supposed to hit enter before we started here. But so we're now bringing up Xcode, and we should see a virtual machine. I did do one thing. I did change the logo to throw in the Angular logo there. So essentially what we have here is a web page that's been wrapped in a web view that allows me to show it inside of, essentially, this is the iOS simulator. Unfortunately, it's really not showing very well on this screen. size, but this is the iOS simulator. So typically, if you're going to debug it outside of the simulator, you'd be running a local server. I'm just running it off the hard drive directly just for this example, just so that you guys can see that it's essentially nothing more than a web page. And whoops. And here is the code base that got created by these lines of code. Basically, this generated all these lines of code, giving me, ta-da, this code base, that logo, and this index here. Okay, great. That's 15 seconds or a little bit more. Man, I definitely. So here we go. So now, PhoneGap and Angular in another 15 seconds. So now what I did was I took the to-do application on the homepage of the Angular website right here. Let me going to expand this just a little. Let's click the Edit Me. So I essentially grabbed these files. Everybody hopefully is familiar with this example. And I quickly created, off to the side here, this is the Android emulator running essentially the to-do app inside of Android. And so this is actually a full-blown application. Once again, screen size issues. I can't even hit the home screen. I can't even hit the home button there, so that's a bit of a problem. And I want to show this as well as I'm going to go on and talk. I'm going to also start running the exact same app that's both in the web browser here. It's in Android here, and of course it's about to come up any second in iOS as well. Give it a second, and there we go. Ta-da. And here we are in the iOS development environment as well. So essentially, that's very powerful. You've got the ability to return to full screen. You've got the ability to run the exact same app in all three environments. So basically what I did was I swapped out the code that was by default in the index.html with the to-do example from the home page. Also, we have the advantage of being able to use the ADB plugin for remote debugging of Chrome on Android. So here we have Chrome on Android. And as well, here we are actually debugging this. And I can show you this is actually a live debug right inside the virtual machine. This is available as of KitKat, this functionality. This is using, if everybody can see that icon right there, the ADB plugin for Chrome. And so now I can actually go and debug my app live inside of the Android Android emulator right here. So that's pretty powerful for debug purposes. Okay. So what are the PhoneGap gotchas? And that's essentially what I think you're mostly here for. Web apps can be slower than native apps, especially on older phones. In general, you're going to want to use CSS animations, not jQuery animations. You've got to work around this 300 millisecond pause that WebKit does, because it's checking to see if you're going to double tap. So it's waiting an extra 300 milliseconds. You're going to want to preload and cache your content whenever possible. And there's usually an expectation when you're dealing with a native app about the user experience. You probably take it for granted that when you're working with a native app, it's going to respond faster. You're going to get user feedback. And when you deal with a web page, you're really forgiving. And you don't notice it until you actually, like when I watch other people use the app, and if they don't know it's a web app, their expectation changes immediately. So you're going to need a lot of user experience, visual audio feedback, and loading routines, spinners, to make sure you prevent any dead spots. And that becomes a lot more important than you could imagine. You also don't want to call, another gotcha is you don't want to call the Cordova native JavaScript functions, the JavaScript wrapped around the native functionality of the phone, until after device ready fires. And Brian Ford created an Angular directive that you can wrap around and your other directives you might create for native code to enable this. So once again, PhoneGap can be used for any any web framework, but we're going to focus here, of course, on AngularJS. So there's this NG-Touch module that has a lot of promise. It's going to allow us to, it has an NG-Click that's supposed to get rid of the 300 millisecond wait time. It also has swipe capabilities. However, notice I say it will have NG-Click. that doesn't wait 300 milliseconds. Doesn't seem to be working that well for right now. The best practice would be to check out the fast click, which will save you that 300 milliseconds. And it's as simple as adding this code to your JavaScript. New fast click around the document body. Angular mobile navigation. So this was created by Andy Jocelyn. It's a very simple, lightweight, doesn't require a lot of libraries, and it kind of mimics the NG view, except it creates its own mobile view, allows for transitioning between partials. And you would use navigate instead of href links, anchors, and here's some examples of how you do it. So this is one of the techniques you would use when dealing with Angular and PhoneGap. Also, there are Angular gestures that are based on hammer.js. So we get events for tap and double tap, swipe, drag, pinch, and rotate. And here's some, oops. Yeah. So we're going to, so here's some examples of how that would work. Let's see, how's my time going? I think I'm doing pretty good, actually. I'm feeling pretty good on time. You know, this example, okay. Nope, I'm not going to show this example. Back to, instead, let's see, it's going to be, let's see. So any hints for how, oh, great, I can scroll down. How do I hit the home key in the iOS simulator? Anyone? Shift-H? Command-Shift-H. Thank you so much. I don't know if I have the time for that. I didn't count on this. But Windows Zoom, I can't Windows Zoom out. What? Too many voices. Yes. Thank you. Scale. Somebody said. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. We shall carry on. Okay, so I'm going to run my other app here because, and then I'm going to Command-Shift-H again. Okay. Good. Now I have my other examples ready to go. Thank you. Back to full screen. So, gestures. We have an up-and-coming jQuery mobile replacement for Angular. And this, kind of like the UI Bootstrap, doesn't actually use jQuery. It just uses the CSS. And therefore, it's much lighter weight. And essentially, when you're doing PhoneGap development, you really want things to be lightweight. Because you're dealing with the fact that you're inside a browser, you don't necessarily have JIT. And depending on the platform, I mean, hopefully we'll get that in some future release. You really are looking for optimization, so avoiding jQuery if possible is definitely a good idea. There was an older project that actually wrapped jQuery mobile. It was an Angular adapter. This is supposed to replace it. Also, it includes the Angular Scrolly, which is an iOS-looking scroll that's done actually by doing element transforms. And it's very impressive. I think actually I do have an example of that now that people have helped me. No, maybe not. Okay, next. So AngularJS native, you're going to want to access the native functionality that's the reason you're potentially using PhoneGap in the first place. Access the accelerometer, access to notifications, the ability perhaps to create vibrations or haptic feedback, geolocation capabilities, and all of these are wrapped in Brian Babyface Ford's Angular PhoneGap ready so that they're ready to be used in PhoneGap here. So let's take a look at some other higher-end examples of functionality that I can demo off. Here from this French company, Revolunet, the Angular Carousel, which is a very impressive example here. This was completely done with HTML5. Very impressive looking. It's very slick. You can click on a picture, and it goes and has lazy loading. Very nice. Angular Snap, also a very impressive demonstration. Here, very simple to set up. You can have a snap toggle on the left or on the right. Here's an example. Command Shift H, thank you. Not have been doing this without that, thank you. So we can drag to the left and we get this really responsive snapping menu. We can also drag the other direction and we can very easily change how it works. We can disable the right side so it only works on one side, etc. A really great looking functionality that you can add in using Angular into your PhoneGap apps. Obviously, the Ionic Framework that most of you might have heard of, I don't know if everybody got a chance to sit in on the talk late. Was that Wednesday? The Ionic, it's the self-proclaimed bootstrap for PhoneGap. It's a CSS framework and JavaScript UI library. It has AngularJS baked in. And it's basically wrapped around PhoneGap, or Cordova. So you get Cordova and Angular from the get-go, plus a bunch of amazing UI widgets. We can take a really quick look at some of the components here. Let's see if I can jump straight down to, so these are the components, but let me show you back to, not the components, but the controllers. Very impressive is slide menu. Also very similar slide menus. This is just an animation showing you how it works. And slide box, also an animation showing you the types of functionalities you can get for free, basically, with the Ionic. And as I wrote here, I like what I see. So I haven't used it much yet, but I'm definitely impressed by it and I'm going to be investing more time into it in the future. So tips and tricks. Basically, you're going to want to do your debugging as much as possible in the Safari and Chrome browsers before you go into the machines. Because you're dealing with HTML5, anything you can do before you get into the iOS or Android systems is great. You might need to conditionally mock the Cordova portions of the environment in order to pull this off. You're going to want to prevent zooming. Once again, you're going to want to have that user experience with instant feedback. You're going to want to wrap any native calls via Cordova JavaScript with Brian Ford's PhoneGap Ready. Cordova JavaScript callbacks should employ safe apply to prevent errors like apply already in progress. Optimizations that you might want to do. You're going to want to minimize your DOM, minimize HTTP calls to prevent latency. You're going to want to preload NG templates. There's a couple of different ways to do this. You might want to use bind once to avoid unnecessary two-way binding, especially if you're creating extremely large apps. The more some people, because Angular has two-way binding, you pretty much take advantage of it, and you don't realize sometimes with an NG repeat, you might be creating hundreds of two-way bindings. And once again, you're in an environment that can be slowed down by that. So bind once basically allows you to say, I want to bring this variable into the UI, but I don't need it to have two-way binding. It's never going to change. And so that prevents it needing to be checked every single time. You're going to want to employ scope on destroy to kill unnecessary callbacks. If you switch to another page away from the map that was asking for your geolocation, you no longer need that geolocation callbacks. You're going to want to destroy those calls that were going on. Otherwise, somebody might go click, 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 and start all these callbacks that are just sitting there as zombies. Whenever possible, use CSS transitions that are GPU assisted as opposed to using jQuery. And automate your iterative workflow. Whoops, all right. Wow, I'm getting there. OK, these are my resources, and a copy of these slides are available at the URL. And in my final 3 minutes, I'm going to give a demo of the app I've been working on, Zen Digital. I wasn't able to use the code here, but hopefully, Command Shift H. This is a PhoneGap app called Paparazzi Empire. Its target market is teenage girls. It discusses basically it's fashion and gossip, and it gamifies reading the news. So I got hired by Tempest Gaming, a company out of Los Angeles, in order to create this app. They had this idea for gamifying the news, and this was their first target market. Essentially, the same way you check in on Foursquare, here you snap a story. So once you snap a story, that gets shared with your friends. We can select your avatar and customize among a number of avatars. And eventually, we're going to have much greater amounts of customization, allowing you to completely make your avatar unique. When you go to snap a story, it goes and loads fashion and gossip news, which is up to the minute. It's basically an RSS feed. So this was from 6 minutes ago. All this. Does anybody here have teenage girls, kids, anyone, sisters? Well, that's your target market. And unfortunately, even as I'm creating this, I'm like, whether you like it or not, they're going to be playing with it. I know because I'm already seeing people pick up this app and go to read their stories. And then, of course, you can get a web view of the exact same story. You snap the story. Here, we've got our one sound effect in here. We snap our story. And then, of course, you get to share it on Facebook or Twitter, make a comment on it, and you get scored points for it. That's the app. Thank you very much. My name's Daniel Zen.